Welcome to the Unstoppable Recording Machine Podcast. And now your host, EYAL Levy.
This show is brought to you by URM Academy, the world's best education for rock and metal producers. You know us for Nail the Mix, but today I'm here to tell you about Ultimate Drum Production, a brand new course that's going to completely transform the way you think about and record drums. You're going to be hearing a lot more about it in the coming weeks, but in the meantime, head over to ultimatedrumproduction.com to learn more. Welcome to the URM podcast. I'm EYAL Levy. Today, I've got the one and only Dan Korneff with me. He's a producer, mixer, engineer who has worked on lots of bands that you know, like Paramore, Breaking Benjamin, Papa Roach. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. He's incredible. He's a genius, makes his own gear. And it doesn't just stop there. As you'll hear in this episode, this is a guy that is always challenging himself. And for people who are first starting out, who get discouraged when maybe their mix isn't as good as they thought it would be, or clients don't react to their work the way they want, or whatever it may be, I want you to pay attention to this episode and realize that even dudes at the very top of their game have their doubts. And so since it's true that people at the top of their game at the beginning of their career all have their doubts, one of the big things that differentiates the people who make it further and the people who don't is in how they learn to deal with those doubts. And so I think that this episode will be good for any of you guys that have wanted to just throw in the towel out of disappointment or letdown. It's not necessarily the best idea. Sometimes it is, but not necessarily. So I'll shut up now. We'll get into the podcast. Here goes. Dan Korneff, welcome to the URM podcast. It's awesome to have you back because, well, first of all, because we love you and your work, but you were the first guest we ever had on almost 3 years ago now.
Wow. That's exciting.
It's crazy that it's been that long, and also time flies.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. I can't believe it was 3 years ago.
It was 2015.
Holy mackerel.
Yeah, we launched March of 2015. So we probably recorded it in February of 2015.
Yep.
So
amazing.
Has a lot changed for you since then? I know that we haven't talked too much since then, so just wondering if you could give us an update as to what you've been up to. You built any new gear, anything amazing going on?
I mean, as far as audio goes, everything's pretty much about the same. Nothing really changes here. Just keep making records, mixing records, nonstop kind of thing. The one thing that has changed is I've spent a lot of time over the last year working on a couple of new venture ideas, and so that, it's taking a lot of time as far as the manpower needed. And I don't have a huge staff of people either. It's just me. So trying to create different things is a very, very difficult task.
Is this something you can share with us? What you're doing,
sure.
Or is it all top secret? Okay, cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So first thing I put a lot of time into, which a lot of people know from seeing online, is I love DIY audio stuff. And,
yes.
I have a huge passion for that and learning electronics and stuff. So I started a company a while ago called Classic PCB. And the whole idea is getting classic circuits into people's hands, stuff that they can build on their own and enjoy doing. So that's the first thing I've been doing. And that takes a lot of time too, is designing the circuit boards, prototyping the circuit boards, making sure everything works, building revisions. You go through 2 or 3 pieces of revisions of the same piece of gear, and it gets to be pretty daunting when there's 12 or 13 different circuit boards you're working on. So that's the first thing I've been working on. And the second one is software design. So a little ways back, I put out a little drum library called Back to School with a company called Basic Drum Co. And and that was a lot of fun, learning contact scripting and stuff like that. It was a lot of fun. And it takes a lot of time and learning how to do the artwork and everything. And so I have a bunch of libraries that are about to come out. But again, it comes down to manpower and just being myself and just trying to learn new new things and these new libraries I'd like to come out as virtual instruments instead of relying on another piece of software. So so it's been a lot of learning of C++ and Juice and all these other things that go into design. It's crazy.
So how do you balance that with making records? Because I mean, I know that for us over here at URM, it's basically, none of us can really do that anymore. And I know that like Joey's got JST and there's Drumforge as well, but I mean, just URM alone is so intense that, there's not much else you can really do. It's tough to do multiple things. How do you manage that? Because making records is a full-time thing.
Oh, absolutely, full-time thing. So for me, it comes down to whatever my ADD is focusing on at that moment. So for like the last week, nice. And it also helps that my wife is a teacher. So I'm up at like 6 a.m. every morning, and I just stay up as long as it takes. So from like 6 to 8, 6 to 9, I'm sitting there either designing a circuit board or designing software, programming, coding, whatever it may be. And then I walk the dog and I run into the studio and work with the band until midnight or 1 a.m. and then head home and try to jot down some ideas of this other shit I've been thinking of, other business plans and stuff. And then I go to bed and I get back up at 6 and start all over again. So basically I don't sleep that much.
So 5 hours a night. Have Pretty you much. Always pulled 5 hours a night?
I mean, I have for the past, probably 15 years, 5 or 6 hours.
Okay.
And that's basically what I run on. And then I take Sundays off and recharge and hang out with the wife.
Did you always keep it that methodical? Or is that something that you've employed recently?
Well, it hasn't always been the same. The schedule's been the same, although, 5 years ago, I had a studio that was 70 miles away from my house. So I spent a good 3.5 hours each day commuting. So that took up all of my time. And I didn't have time to do anything other than make records. So about 5 years ago, I opened up a studio that's like right around the corner from my house. And that's really allowed me to do more.
So what would you do in those 3.5 hours a day of commute?
Dude, what really pisses me off is that looking back on it, I did that commute for like 8 years, and I didn't do a single fucking thing. I could have learned another language. I could have read audiobooks, something. And I just spent most of my time like on the BQE just fucking cursing and punching my steering wheel and yelling at people. Yeah, I was really upset I didn't do anything.
I guess the first year of Nail the Mix, I lived in Atlanta and we shot mainly in Florida. And this was when we really didn't have very many subscribers. And so I felt guilty about asking the company to buy me an airplane ticket. So I would just drive from Atlanta to Orlando every single time. And I mean, it's not a monster drive, but it's 8 hours. And if you do it 2 times or 3 times a month, or 4 times, it gets crazy after a while. And I found that the only thing that kept me wanting to actually do it is that I would listen to books the whole time or podcasts or something. And that actually made me look forward to the drive. Now I fly to Orlando for those, and it's a 50-minute flight, and I think I like that way better. But I do kind of miss the 8 hours by myself, being able to just listen to information nonstop.
Right. Good for you, man. I'm glad you're able to do that.
Well, not anymore. Now I just, I don't know. I can't.
You have 7 more hours to yourself now.
Yeah, I can't bring myself to do that anymore. I kind of think that was a moment in time, and that's about it. So it sounds to me like, and I think that this is pretty impressive, is that you're sounds like you're learning every different aspect that goes into creating these products. Whereas I know that some people like to just team up. If they don't know how to code it, they will find someone who knows how to code it, not always learn to code it themselves.
Right.
What are your thoughts on doing all that stuff yourself? Is it just a product of your curiosity as a person, the way your brain works, or I'm just curious about what leads you to want to take on all the different tasks?
For me, it's not necessarily about, getting a product out or getting stuff out. It's about the learning. And if I can create something along the way that someone else would use, then that's awesome. But also running businesses like this, it's actually really good to know what goes on under the hood all the time.
Absolutely.
So that way you have a good idea of what someone else is doing, or when you make requests about your product, you can know if it's a realistic request or not. And then also kind of manage the project better along the way. So I'm not quite there yet, but you know exactly what that's about.
Well, yeah, I have a perfect example. So we just did an event called the URM Summit last year, where basically it was like 4 days with a bunch of speakers, and subscribers and listeners came in from all over the world. It was super awesome. We all stayed at the same hotel, and there was a lot of coordination involved, and it's the kind of thing that you should probably hire a pro to do. But
right.
I just decided that for year one and probably year two, I'm going to handle that internally and take most of it upon myself and really learn what goes into this, so that we can move on to having a planner maybe from years 3 and on, but I'll know exactly what goes into it, so that I make sure that that they're just going to amplify whatever we could have done. And I don't mean micromanage, but just so that we understand everything that the planner's trying to do, or what the goals are, or how it all works. Because I've noticed, at least in my experience, like for instance, if you're in a band and you hire a publicist and you don't really understand how the game works of getting publicity, like you don't understand that a lot of articles, for instance, are written about people or artists who advertise in the magazine, for instance. And
Sure.
so, if you want to get on the cover, you want to have a feature, it helps to have a full page ad, and it helps to build those types of financial relationships, things like that if you don't understand how it works, it's going to be hard for you to get the most out of your relationship with that publicist, because
Sure.
it's almost like you've got them working with one hand tied behind their back. And I kind of feel like this is the same sort of thing. Like, how can you how can you help a coder achieve your vision for a plugin if you can't speak his language?
Right. Yep.
But I mean,
That's it.
it's really, really time consuming to learn code. Have you always been interested in code and computers?
I guess I have. I mean, my mother was a programmer, and her whole side of the family were programmers. So
Okay.
I grew up around computers, and it makes a lot of sense to me. Although I didn't dive into it as deep as they did, and I sort of regret it. As my parents were learning programming, that they would invite me to come down and just hang out in the computer room, and I never did. I was too busy throwing a stick around or something, and I should have done it. I should have just sat down and see what they were doing. Oh, well.
Do you think that even so that it rubbed off somehow?
Oh, I'm sure it did. I'm sure at some point it did.
The reason I'm asking is because I've heard about how you work from people who have worked with you, that you're super, super precise about everything, and no detail left untouched. And I know that lots of producers are like that and engineers are like that, but the way people described it made me think a lot more of people like my partner Joey, or this guy who actually edits these podcasts, is a great engineer and editor, John Douglas. Like, both those guys are computer people, and so the way that they approach computers and software, really, you can tell in the way that they engineer. and they're always really good at fixing computer problems, and that helps stupid people like me. But you can just tell from the way that they organize their mind or their workflow when it comes to audio that the computer thing is rubbed off. So I'm wondering if it's in some way rubbed off on you, in your opinion.
I'm sure it has. Yeah, I think it has. And, when you experience or see things like that, you sort of learn, the basics of troubleshooting and signal flow, even in software. Software, everything has some sort of flow. It goes from one thing to another. And just having the basic understanding of that, I think is super helpful in anything that you're going to do, whether it be audio or computers or, trying to start your car when it's broken.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's interesting that you're making plugins, especially because you make the gear as well. And there's actually a piece of yours, an 1176, in the URM control room right now.
Oh, hell yeah.
But yeah, it's really good. I know that a lot of guys that are very much into making analog gear and analog gear in general aren't too, I guess, things are changing now, but they're not too thrilled with plugins, I guess. Not always, at least. I'm wondering where your opinion on that lies and what's leading you to go into making digital audio products like plugins.
Well, I'm sitting in front of racks and racks and racks of gear and an SSL console. And I think that kind of tells you where my mind is as far as what I think about plugins. Not to say that I don't use them. I use my fair share of plugins. But I think that the analog stuff sounds better. And until proven so, I'll keep doing it the old way. Until the new way sounds just as good, if not better. And the idea behind the software stuff is that I think that, when you deal with music all the time, you're dealing with a creative part of your brain. And sometimes it's fun to be able to create something that is a creative product, an art product, but it uses the other side of your brain. Different kind of thinking, kind of like puzzle building and stuff like that. And also at the same time, I kind of look at it like, well, maybe I can think of something or a way to program something or a way to do something that no one's done before that maybe does sound a little more analog-ish. There are a lot of companies that do great jobs at it. I'm not going to lie, I've used that gain reduction plugin here and there. And the Finality plugin is awesome. And UAD does awesome stuff. And it sounds really, really good. And if you don't have the real thing, those guys kind of help you get through it. But at the same time, maybe there's something I can do that's a little bit different. And there are tons of people. There's obviously a wider audience for people that can afford a plugin compared to, say, a $5,000 compressor. So, it's catering to a slightly different audience.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot to be said for being able to just get ideas down quickly.
Sure.
Like speaking of the creativity, not just what goes into building something new and coming up with something other people haven't come up with, but there's something great about being able to, I guess, you're writing or something, bring up a template that sounds pretty good. Everything's pretty much kind of dialed in to a degree, at least for the meat and potatoes of what you're probably going to write. And to not have to spend time worrying about setting that up every single time is quite awesome, I think.
Absolutely.
But then that brings up something we talked about last time, which is that, and I'm curious if you still have it set up this way. You told us that your board and your outboard, it basically is set up like a template in that stuff stays perma-wired from, like certain outboard to certain channels, et cetera, so that you don't have a huge turnaround time when recalling mixes or going from song to song, for instance.
Yeah, that is still Correct. It's funny to say this, but being on an analog console with gear is at a disadvantage as far as moving at the pace of what people need today. People expect you to be able to click a button and turn up a hi-hat a half dB and then export the session again. And in the analog world, it's just not that simple. But, a few years back, I did separate my recording and my mixing paths to sort of speed up the efficiency. So yeah, the console is always set for mix. I have dedicated channels for everything, and I keep pumping the same audio out of the same channels and very, very similar signal paths. And not to say that I don't experiment, because about 3 months ago I switched up my setup as far as my routing on the console, and life-changing for me. Completely changed up my sound. It made it a lot easier to work with. So, it's like you keep to what you know, and as time progresses, you sort of update things and make the things that are lacking, you try to make them better.
Can you talk a little bit about what you did change about the setup that made your life easier?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I have an 8000 series SSL, which gives me 2 stereo buses and 4 audio groups, as well as, tons of different direct buses and stuff like that. For the longest time, I was using my stereo bus 1 for music, stereo bus 2 for vocals, and printing them separately as 2 different sets of tracks and then bouncing them together, and that was my mix. And recently, I thought about things that were lacking in my mixes, and sometimes I would tuck like a drum stem up underneath my main mix to kind of open up everything. And I thought, there's got to be a way to do it on my console so it's all in one. So I started using my 4 stereo groups on the console as 4 separate mix buses. So I have one set as my main mix bus, which I really smash up with 2 SSL bus compressors, and then I have like a mix B, which is an uncompressed mix bus that I'll tuck some other stuff up underneath there, maybe some cymbals, maybe a drum or something like that to kind of let those sit on top, and then another stereo bus for any sort of special effects like 808s and reverse cymbals and stuff like that, and then another stereo bus for all of my vocals.
So, a question about stereo buses 1 and 2. So, like you said that on 2, sometimes you'll tuck in cymbals and drum elements that you want to sit on top. Are those molded out are they also on 1 and then also on 2, or will the cymbals only be on 2, for instance?
No, they're multed out. So I'll do my full mix on, say, mix bus A.
Okay, got it.
And then mix bus B, I'll use an aux or something to send a little something extra, or the small fader on my SSL to send a little extra of the same signal to the uncompressed bus.
Okay, and then vocals and then effects?
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
And then it all funnels out of one stereo output through my SSL compressor, and then I print it back in on my computer.
What led you to make this change?
Well, I had, I guess it was more of an efficiency thing, where before I was having to print 2 stereo tracks at one time. So my mix bus was printed on its own track, my vocal bus was printed on a separate track, and then I would use stems to kind of tuck up underneath. So just the idea of being able to keep it all into one file was a lot more attractive to me, and it's achieving the same results.
That makes a lot of sense. How often do you rework things like that to improve them?
I'd say probably, it takes me until I get pissed off enough about doing what I'm doing currently. So maybe every 2 years or so, I was like, God damn it, I hate doing this. I hate having to do this. There's got to be some way to do it better, and I just take some time and do it.
So, like when something is a pain point and it's become enough of a pain point that you can no longer take it, then go for it. I think that it's interesting that you said every 2 years, because that's a pretty big operation and not quite that much elapsed time in between. It just goes to show, I guess, the level of evolution that you're always striving for. I think one thing a trap that a lot of, I'm just going to say people, because it's not just engineers, it's musicians and just people in their lives will get to one plateau and kind of just stay there for a long, long time, maybe forever. So like, the first time that they start getting decent results or something, they'll just lock into that setup, and that's that. Or kind of the same way that, people who grew up listening to one style of music, they will not deviate from that in their lives. I just think it's very interesting that you keep on updating the setup, even though, it's not, you've been making great records for a long time, so it's not like the setups before that didn't work. They obviously did work.
They did work. I've made a lot of records, and a lot of really good records a certain way, and sometimes you kind of get tired of doing the same thing, or at the same time, maybe a lot of other people love that stuff that you did, but you think it's fucking dog shit, and and you want to make it better. So you should always be trying new things, always.
I think that it's kind of interesting what you just said about how some people might praise you for something, but you think it's dog shit. I think it's just bad to listen to too many people's opinions, good or bad, because kind of, if you listen to them when they're praising you, then you should listen to them when they're trashing you, because you shouldn't be selective about it. But I think they're both just as inaccurate. I don't think that anyone can really know how far you could push it but yourself. And even if people think that something's great, if you know that you can make it even greater, then why not? I know that it would drive me nuts to know that I could make something better and not just do it.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. Prime example is back in the day, working on that Paramore record and putting the final touches on the mixes and sending it out and being really, really proud of it. And, they post a video online, everything's great. And then you start looking at the comments and you're like, oh, these drums sound terrible. Everything sounds fake. It sounds like a one shot, like all these like dogging comments that like, they kept me up at night. And, and it ended up people, just time tells, people loved that drum sound and how inaccurate some people's opinions may actually be. And, it was from that moment on, I stopped reading YouTube comments and shit like that, because first of all, they're always hurtful. There's never like, anything that's amazing. And, if I do see a comment that's just like, oh, this is amazing, this is the best thing I've ever heard, then I start thinking, well, what the fuck does this guy go? This guy doesn't know shit. Maybe the song's terrible. He doesn't know. Exactly. So, you go back and forth, and eventually you just stop reading that shit.
It's really not healthy to go looking at it.
It's not. But at the same time, it's hate like that sort of drove me for a while to be better, and even though people loved the stuff I was doing, it could always be better. And listening to other influences and other things and trying to figure out, well, what actually is better, and trying to shape your stuff to be what you think is a better version of what you are. That's the part that's really tough, is that everything is so subjective. You can make the record that you think is the most amazing thing ever and sonically is superior to anything you've ever heard. And, and people listen to it and go, yeah, it's okay. It's all right. So you never really know.
And also, along with that, you could make the record that you think is like in lots of different ways, from songwriting to mix to production, every aspect is just the best thing you've ever done, and then it doesn't really sell at all, and nobody cares.
Yeah.
It's you can't really predict those things. The hate online is an interesting topic for me, because with what we do, there's always haters. Anytime that you sell education or digital products or anything like that, there's a built-in hate crowd for that kind of stuff. And I've learned a lot from watching my partner Joey, and also watching how, for instance, like someone like Steven Slate deals with it, because he gets tons of brutality all the time. And so does Joey. Like, people are just shit talk him all day long on the internet, but they make great products and lots of people buy them and lots of people love them, and the companies keep on growing. And I've noticed with when we get some of that hate online for whatever reason, that it doesn't actually affect the way that things are going. And so there's no reason to put myself in a bad mood over something that doesn't matter, because we keep getting new students. They keep on learning how to be better. They're happy with it. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help people get better. And we can't please everybody, obviously. So I just find that for the most part, it's good to just ignore it, because you're just accepting negativity into your life that really doesn't even affect the outcome of what you're working on.
That's right. Unless they're writing your checks, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. And at the same time, if you believe the negative feedback too much, you can put yourself in a less than ideal mental state for doing good work.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's just, I think it's just good to avoid that stuff. But you're absolutely right in that it sucks to see it. Like, I don't care who you are, it sucks to see it. And I've seen, even movie stars and politicians who are like, 80,000 trillion times more known than any of us in audio. And, the amount of hate that they get, and they say they never read comments or reviews or any of that stuff, because why do it?
It's true. It's true. I mean, I'm my own worst enemy. I never think that anything I do is good. And like, for instance, I was just out of work for almost 2 weeks with the flu, and I got back in on Monday, yesterday, I think, and my wife texts me. She's like, "How's your first day back?" I'm like, "It fucking sucks." Like, 1 second I think I'm a genius, the second I'm a fucking idiot. Like, this is the worst shit I've ever heard, and then I'm a genius again, and then I'm an idiot. Like, I don't need someone's shitty YouTube comments on top of that already. Like, I can trash myself pretty well. I'm good at it. I don't need someone else's help.
I mean, you're the pro. Yeah, no one's going to outdo you with your own personal self-hate. I feel the exact same way. No one's going to hate me as much as I can do for myself.
Yeah. Pretty good at it.
How do you deal with that? I'm actually curious about that, because I don't know if you've noticed. I know that you're in our group, and every once in a while you post. I don't know if you've noticed that every now and then someone will be like, "How do you deal with thinking that you suck?" Or, "I can't get over the fact that I think my work is terrible and I don't want to go on." There are posts like that, and I would try to tell people to just keep doing more work or go walk the dog or something, but that's a perfectly natural thing, and the best engineers I know all feel that way.
Oh, absolutely.
How do you deal with the downs?
Dude, the downs are tough, man, because it's not like... it's not like this is a fucking game. This is how I support my family, and this is what I do for a career. And when you think about how much you suck, it gets pretty dark, and it gets rough. For me, I just kind of look back at the projects I've done, and at a certain point, just have to be happy with with what you're doing. And not really caring about what anyone else says or what everyone else is doing. Just live in the moment and kind of make whatever you can do, whatever you're working on currently, make it the best thing you've ever done. And, and sometimes that's hard. Because after, like, for me personally, when I finish a project, there's a good week of like, oh, this is amazing. This is the best thing I've ever done. This is, life-changing material. And then, a week later you listen back to it, you're like, oh, this is fucking dog shit. Like, why did I do that? Why did I do this? I can't fucking hear shit. Maybe I should just quit. It happens. It happens to everybody. But you just kind of use that as motivation to get better. And what I've learned recently is when I'm really down, I find that I sort of look at things at a big, a larger perspective of like, oh, I'm unhappy with this mix, or I'm unhappy with the way this song turned out. And, learning how to break it down into little pieces. Like, okay, well, what don't you like about it? Oh, well, the cymbals are hashy, or guitars are too low, and you sort of individualize all the issues and take it to heart and just kind of tweak a little bit here, tweak a little bit there, and then all of a sudden, you're back to being a genius again. And when things get hard, just break it down.
That's interesting, because I definitely think that one of the things that works is to remind yourself that you are not your work. So even if you don't like that mix or whatever it is that you're working on, and you think it sucks for whatever reason, that doesn't mean that you suck. And I know that since this is both kind of our livelihoods, but also an art, it's very, very hard to sometimes separate the personal side of it, because art's a very personal thing. I mean, obviously there's the science side to audio, but art, it's a mix of art and science. So it's very, very hard to get rid of that personal side. But I mean, that is what you have to do. You have to turn that part of your brain off and just pretend like it's somebody else's mix, and just give it yourself an honest mix crit and fix those things.
Yep. Absolutely. Sometimes it's hard, letting go of stuff. I found myself really getting depressed over a mix and realizing that, that I'm kind of afraid to let it go. You get really, really attached to something, and that as soon as you finish this mix, like, that's it. And
forever.
That's it forever, exactly. And learning to sort of let go of that feeling and do your job and make it as great as you can make it, and moving on. And I find that a lot, especially mixing the very first song of the record. Setting everything up and tweaking everything the way that you want it, and finishing the mix and then going, it's not really exactly what I wanted. And I started thinking, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to sit here and sulk about it? No, you send it to the band, you start working on song 2, and maybe song 2 will come together in a different way. And you go back and tweak song 1 to fix, whatever issues you have. Maybe you nail it in song 2. Maybe you nail it in song 3. And that's really helped me a lot of realizing that, well, this isn't the end, that's just song 1. Obviously there's a lot more pressure when you're just mixing the singles of a record. That's always hard, because you can't really get into a groove. You just kind of do your natural thing and hope that it works out. And, most of the time it does, but just mixing singles is always difficult. I always prefer mixing records.
That reminds me of something I learned while tracking drums all the time back at my old studio, because it was mainly used as a drum room. So whether it was me tracking or me assisting, whatever the situation was, or me renting it out to somebody, those were 3 things that happened almost year round at my place. And so lots of drum sessions. And I started to notice that, obviously some budgets are smaller than others. And sometimes you can't take 3 days or 5 days to get tones. Sometimes you only have 1 day. And it's not that we couldn't get the tones done in 1 day. Of course we could. But if you get them done on day 1 and then track something morning of day 2 and then keep working on tones, by the end of day 2, it's going to be way better than it was on day 1. And then if you do that for 1 more day, what you have on day 3 will be better than day 2 or 1. So if you had, and that, I noticed that happens even if we had decided to stop working on drum tones. Like, it just gets better over the first 3 days, because you're still going to be moving mics and you're still going to be, adjusting a few things. So even if you were like, okay, a drum tone time is over, it still kind of is drum tone time. And so I just really started to understand that it's okay if you don't nail something on day 1 or on mix 1 or on song 1, that really you need to let things come together. So, I mean, sometimes they come together from the beginning, and that's great, but to expect that every time is almost like expecting luck to just present itself. And I've noticed that that's not great thinking. I think it's almost more realistic to expect that it's going to take 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 tracks before everything gels in a mix or in a drum session.
That's right.
And as soon as I started thinking about it that way, my drum productions got a lot better, because I knew, okay, by the third night, things are going to be really fucking awesome. So I should try to get them to hold off as much as possible on pressuring me to start tracking. It, I don't know, it really helped. And so I would start carrying that over to mixes as well. Not to kill myself over mix 1 not being perfect, because it's probably going to get better on 2 and then especially on 3.
Right. And on top of that, like I said, you're your worst own enemy. So what you think is garbage, you send it out, and, before you know it, the band's sending you texts like, dude, this is amazing, the best thing we've ever heard. And to you, it's still dog shit. So, keep that in mind, too, that what you think is terrible might actually be okay. Might be usable. And at the same time, that, like you said, the first thing you do might not be the greatest. Maybe you need a couple days into it to figure it out.
Yeah, and there's a number of reasons for it. In the drum session example, it could just be that the drummer relaxes and just starts playing with better feel because he's relaxed. Whatever the case may be, there's so many different factors that go into why something gets better that I just think that it's just good to kind of beat yourself up less, if at all possible. The other thing that just everything you've been saying gets me thinking about is, when you have to let a project go, it sucks, because being your own worst enemy, it's never perfect, no matter what. You'll always hear the mistakes. And that actually is true for products as well. I mean, no product is ever perfect, especially when you're dealing with digital products like information products or software. Like if you release a course, we released a course, speed mixing, last year, and it did great. But now that it's been a while, I know exactly what it was missing and why it's not perfect. And when we release it again, it's going to have updates to include things that we missed. And we're releasing a drum course on Friday, and it's super comprehensive. But I know for a fact that if we re-release it, we want to add updates, because there's no way that we possibly covered everything. And, with a plugin, there's no way that you can possibly account for every single situation that might come up. And so you will never have a perfect plugin. So you just have to learn to release things.
Yeah, let it go.
And let them go. Or you'll never get anywhere.
Yep. Let it go and see what happens. Obviously do due diligence and try to make it as good as you can, but let it go, see what happens, and adjust afterwards.
If you're like most producers, you're dialing drum sounds the old-fashioned way, by trial and error, swapping out drums, heads, and mics until you finally find something that works, oftentimes for several exhausting and tedious days. Sound familiar, right? I know I have spent up to a week getting drum sounds in the past before I knew some of this stuff. So guess what? It doesn't have to be so painful. Ultimate Drum Production is our brand new course that teaches you the scientific method for dialing in the perfect drum sound on the very first try. Exactly, the first try, not the 100th try. It explains in extreme detail the sonic character of every single component of drum sound, with exhaustive profiles of every kind of drum head, shell material, bearing edge, and hoop, as well as ridiculously detailed tutorials on mic selection, placement, and room choice, editing, and mixing. And when you understand drum tone at such a fundamental, insanely deep level, it's like having a set of tone Legos you can use to easily build the sound you hear in your head. You don't need to guess and check. You just assemble the building blocks however you want. This course is only going to be around for a couple more weeks before we close it for at least a year. To find out more and get access, just head on over to ultimatedrumproduction.com, and we'll see you in class. Did you ever have, I guess, maybe earlier in your career, did you ever have an aversion to sending off the first mix?
No, not so much. I mean, I was a lot more cocky when I was younger because I didn't know shit. When I was younger, it's just like, yeah, this is the best thing in the fucking world. Have at it. No one's going to have comments. And then as you get older, you start figuring out, well, wow, I'm not that good. I'm good, but I'm not that good.
That's funny. That makes a lot of sense. I guess I was just never that cocky. I was always afraid to send them off, and I had to train myself to do it, to get comfortable with it.
Yeah, I mean, you get exposed. It's like you're putting all your cards out. Everyone's seeing exactly what you have. And, it does get scary, putting it out. But eventually you just, when you're young, you're cocky. You don't give a shit. You just fucking do it. And, and then people start barking back. And eventually you start getting cautious about what you do or more aware of what you do. And then it's kind of like a bell curve. And then you get to the other side of the bell curve where you know that what you do is pretty good. And you just stop giving a fuck. And you fucking send it out and, see what some idiot says about their bass guitar or their fucking kick drum tone or whatever. You just wait for the comments to roll in.
Yeah, for sure. So we've come to that point in the episode where I would like to ask you some questions that some of our subscribers asked for you.
They better be good questions.
Some of them are. I'm going to skip the bad ones or anything that we kind of already covered.
No, but bad ones, give them to me anyway.
We'll only ask the bad ones. How about that? I want to start with this one because it kind of goes back to one of the old podcasts that we did. And it's from Patrick Graff, and here goes. In an earlier podcast, you said use wideners in parallel, but filtered it to only affect a specific frequency range on guitars. Could you elaborate on why you use them this way and any tips on making it work? Because I've never been successful using a widener this way. And then he also said, it's also been a while since I listened to that podcast, so I may have missed something.
Well, everyone mixes different. Everyone's mix is different. And for me, I always find, I only use wideners on guitars. I love to hear guitars that sound like they're, outside of the speaker. It's not that hard to do with high-end and mid-range. You crank it up and it makes the guitar sound wider. But it's always the lower mids that seem like they get, centralized. They're always in the center somehow. And with wideners, I end up sending them to a channel. I think I said this last time. Send them the widener to a channel and boost a lot of like lower mids, a lot of 800 and sort of that area. And tuck that up underneath. So, your high end and mid range from the original tracks are boosted a little bit. It makes them sound a little wider, and then you tuck up this like ultra wide 800 hertz underneath those guitars, and it really makes the whole track, both tracks sound like they're way wider than the speakers. And I'm not really sure what else I can add to that, but
I'd be curious to see what he was doing because I know lots of people tried it and thought it was miraculous just based on the last podcast. So here's one from Chris Bowman. Hey, Dan, in conversations, you've talked about doing things differently in your studio. I'm sure you have some tried and true methods of capturing exactly what you're looking for sound-wise. Have there been any times in your career that something totally unconventional or downright accidental made it onto a record of yours?
All the time. You're always trying something new, something different, or at least I try to. For instance, a lot of people were using this like little kick sub thing to get some sort of low end on the kick drum. And for me, it was just always the wrong frequency. And I kind of just reversed engineered what the stuff was doing. And, I found through some research that, back in the day, a lot of people would use PAs, like subs for PAs, as microphones, wired, they're just wired in reverse. So for me, a lot of times I'll stick a sub in front of my kick drum, and I'll plug that into a DI and record it, and it just seems to be like the right frequency for a sub for a kick drum. As far as things accidental, like on a Breaking Benjamin record, we need like a lo-fi sounding vocal. There was like an empty paper towel roll sitting in the booth, and I told Ben to pick it up and talk through it, and it sounded like a lo-fi, like phasey kind of vocal, and we ended up recording it and putting it on a record. Don't be afraid to experiment with stuff. And, for kids, now that I think about it, it's a lot different experience for them. A lot of these kids and a lot of people that are listening to this podcast are limited by their resources. They're still learning. They have a computer and they're plugging stuff in and, right into their interfaces. And they're relying on plugins and stuff like that to give them their sounds. But don't be afraid to pick up a mic, plug it into your interface, and stick it in a weird spot. For another instance, for a record, I had a drum set in a room, and next to it was a piano. And I noticed when the drummer was playing that there were some cool, like, reverby kind of harmonics coming off of the piano. And I ended up miking up the piano, and that ended up being like the reverb for the drum set. All sorts of weird sonic things happen all the time. And just keep your mind open and kind of try to capture them if you can.
I actually tried that piano trick once with Matt Brown, the drum tech. We tried that when we did a Monument session for Creative Live. We actually mic'd up the inside of the piano. It didn't work for that, but I can totally see how it would work in certain situations. Obviously not every situation is the same, but yeah, we definitely tried that. It was awesome.
When with a band like Monuments, there's a lot of articulation and precision going on. Maybe for a slower band, more of a rock vibe, that would have worked well.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was the problem, actually. Here's a question from Donald Speck. Could I get any details on the Candiria discs you've worked on? That would be amazing.
Oh,
specifically
shit.
how you deal with the interplay between the bass and the other instruments in the mix. Mike from Candiria doesn't just copy the guitar line like most bass players. How do you get the guitars in those mixes to be full sounding without that constant low end support?
Wow. That's old school. Candiria. Yeah, made a record called What Doesn't Kill You? And that was my first introduction to sort of math metal, jazz metal, and where everything was very, very precise. First of all, the bass player, Mike, he's just amazing. He plays with his fingers, very, very precise, very, very articulate. And the engineer who recorded the bass is my good friend, Wayne Davis. He's just a sonic genius. And I put him in a room with the bass player, and he captured all the stuff, which was amazing. Now, on guitar-wise, you kind of have to scoop out, or you have to make space for everything. And this may come as a surprise, but we used a lot of single coil pickups for those guitars. A lot of Telecaster on it. So, a lot more mid-rangey kind of guitars, and that left a lot of space for the bass. And I think that may have been the combo that you hear, that you enjoy.
Okay, that sounds actually like it makes a lot of sense. I've had some experience with using single coils on heavy records, and it's surprising what you can get out of them. I think people need to not write them off as an option.
Yeah, they're amazing, especially for heavy stuff. Don't be afraid to take a telly, jam it into a high gain amp. Obviously, it's single coil, you're going to get some buzz, you're going to get some noise. And that record was especially difficult because I was in Manhattan. So, it was picking up 30 different radio stations. But, you kind of figure it out, and you turn your guitar to a certain way, you move it around the room until you get the least amount of buzz and noise, and you go for it.
Great answer. So, Alec Garnica, I'm sorry if I messed up your name, dude. He said, you talked about a few years ago that you were going to release a drum sample pack from the album Riot by Paramore. Do you ever plan on releasing these samples?
Yes. So, years ago, 2007, 2008-ish, somewhere around there. After the session was done, I recorded samples of that full kit. And I've been holding on to them, by the skin of my teeth. And I did plan on releasing them. I still do plan on releasing them. And I'm currently designing the virtual instrument for those plugins, or for that library. And again, it just comes down to the amount of free time that I have, and also making a product that's worth releasing. Making something that someone will be excited to use and that looks amazing, So my graphical interface is done. It looks exactly like the SSL I used to record it. Now figuring out the programming behind adding in other effects and stuff like that. Like, I used the SPX90 on the snare drum a lot. It was a big part of that sound. And also the RMX16. A lot of these things externally had a big part of the sound that I want to be able to recreate, instead of just recording a sample of the snare drum going through the compex that you can blend in with the sound that's already there. Like, I want to be able to create the option for you to be able to tweak that plug-in, to tweak the reverb, to tweak, all this different stuff. And it just takes a long time. So in short, yes, absolutely plan on releasing it. Graphics are done. Library's been recorded for 10 years or whatever it is. It just comes down to the time that I can put aside to program the proper plugin for you guys.
I'm sure that lots and lots of people will be very, very excited when that time comes.
I'm sure they will.
Here's one from Danny Salat. Actually, he's got a few questions. So what books or sources would you suggest for someone interested in starting to build audio gear and wanting to learn what's going on with modifying circuits instead of using all-in-one kits? And also, and this is my personal favorite question, when will you be doing a Nail the Mix session?
Okay, I love these questions. All right, question one. I spent a lot of time with this guy's name's Ernie Fortunato, and he used to work for SSL back in the day, and he would come and tech my console years ago. And by hanging out with him, I picked up a lot of stuff, but he said, you know what, I learned a lot of stuff by reading a book called The Art of Electronics. And The Art of Electronics, I absolutely recommend to anyone that wants to get into any sort of electronic stuff, DIY stuff. It's written by two guys from Harvard, and it's not like, super dry, super boring stuff. They're hippies, and they explain electronics in a certain way that I understood. And also they would say, look, here's all the math behind it. You don't need to know this, or this, but you absolutely need to pay attention to this right here. So yeah, Art of Electronics. You got to read it and understand it. And they start from the very, very beginning, like what is electricity, and they move on to different circuits, and just by looking at pictures, you can pick up like, okay, well, all right, well, this is the line amp from 1176. Like, I see the Darlington transistor pair. I see, this, I see that. So yeah, read that book, and it'll help you.
Oh, so just on question number one, so that book is not audio specific. It's just electronics specific.
It's just look, if you're going to get into electronics, it is all 100% math. That's all you need to know is math. And that book will tell you everything you need to know about math. And if you're not good at math, then, you need to learn. Maybe electronics isn't for you, but if you want it to be for you, you can learn.
It's not for me. Yeah, I go to people like you or Joey for stuff that requires heavy math. Not me. Better you guys than me is the way I see it.
Absolutely.
So question two.
What was question two?
When are you coming on Nail the Mix?
Oh my God. I've been wanting to do it for the longest time. And the issue I'm finding is, one, it's always hard to find time to set aside for audio education. It takes a lot of time to be able to teach someone to do something right and to show them what you do. And there's always that fear of like, well, I'm kind of laying all my cards out here. I'm showing everyone exactly what I do. And that's how I feed my family, which is tough. And the other problem is I'm having trouble finding the right project to do it on. I'm sure there are tons of projects, Breaking Ben and Paramore, Pierce the Veil, that people would love to do. But I always kind of see it as a higher thing of what's the best, if I was going to do this, what's the best learning project to do? And I feel like, if I did nail the mix, which I'm totally open to, I feel like it would have to be a combo thing. It would have to be like nail the recording plus nail the mix plus, this is the track that goes in your portfolio builder. And, just trying to find the right project to do that is very difficult for me. I'm not sure what that should be.
Well, now that I know what it would take to make you do it, I can come up with a solution for all those things. And
that's
the
great.
thing that I will say, though, about the laying all the cards on the table thing is that no matter what you put in an education session, you can't show people your ears or your brain, So I feel like if it really worked that way, then every single one of our students would sound exactly like Joey.
Right.
Joey hasn't done one in a while. I'm just saying that as an example, but it hasn't been the case at all. So I feel like there's a level of expertise and just understanding of audio that is unique to you and that no one will ever be able to get, no matter what they know how to do. And that's kind of my argument for why it's not giving away the farm, because you can't give them you. And that's the most important part of any mix, in my opinion.
That's very true.
So,
and if I was a kid and I was going to learn, the way that I learned is that I interned at a bunch of different studios, and I became chief engineer at a big studio, and I was able to watch a bunch of different producers work. And if I was going to do it, I would want them to learn the cross-pollination effect of how one person influences another person, and, being able to see a bunch of different people, trying to figure that out is also a thing for me of maybe if I was going to do something like that where I'm teaching something, is trying to figure out how to teach someone how I learned, whatever that means.
I do think that real life is the best way, for sure. Absolutely. It's so, if I look back at my own history, the times where I had someone way better than me to learn from were the times that I had the most progress, hands down. Absolutely. And they made a massive, massive difference. So here's one from Zaylin Ciganero, and I'm sorry if I got your name wrong. What albums have you had a hand in writing, vocal arrangements or rearrangement or vocal melodies, yada, yada, whatever? And what was that process like for you?
I feel like part of that process in every record that I do, when you're sitting in that producer chair, it's ultimately your responsibility to guide this band through their whole recording process. I can't think of a time where I haven't suggested a vocal melody or come up with a bunch of vocal harmonies or arrangements or guitar parts. I think that just comes with the job. I'm not sure what the rest of that question was, but it happens all the time.
Yeah, I think the stuff, like my interpretation of his question just sounds like stuff that producers do normally. I mean, aren't you supposed to help them realize the best version of the song possible?
Absolutely.
Then there is that fine line between what counts as production and what counts as writing. But I still think that no matter what, it's your job to help the song shine. So
absolutely,
whatever it takes.
Yep. That's right. And so it basically comes down to, all the time. If someone's singing something you don't like, you fucking say something about it. If you have a better idea, you put it out. You're there to guide the band.
Yeah, exactly. And here is our final question. It's from Sean O'Shaughnessy, and he's wondering, what's a sound or tone that you've been seeking to recreate that has eluded you?
To recreate? That
I'm not sure what he meant by recreate. I'm going to rephrase his question. All right, this is the rephrased version. What's a sound or tone that you've been seeking to create that has eluded you?
Wow. I don't know. I mean, I kind of go for it when I do it. Although, obviously, there are a ton of influences. When you hear something that you're just like, wow, that's fucking dope. I never thought of that. If it comes down to that, there are tons and tons of things. There are, dude, any vocal harmony from Queen. Like, if you can fit that into anything you're doing, you're golden. It's 30 years old, whatever, but if you can emulate that, you are golden.
I agree.
I hear a lot of like creative bands out there, minus the Bear, do tons and tons of awesome guitar effects. People that really understand their instrument and they experiment with different things. Those are the things that I look for and that I try to emulate when I'm working on projects. Something like anything like that.
I totally agree about the Queen harmonies. They're unbelievable, the best. So, Dan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been awesome catching up and having you on again, and hopefully we don't take 3 years before the next one.
Well, look, all right, I'll tell you what. The next Nail the Mix, I want to mix along. Give me the session. I want to do a mix and throw it up there and see what people think.
Dude, have you heard the song we're doing this month? The Carnival track?
No, what are you doing?
Dude, it's fucking amazing. It's maybe one of the best engineered songs we've ever had. It's
holy shit.
Forster Savell, Australian producer mixer, is the guy, and the band is an Australian band called Carnival. That I don't know if you've heard of them or not. They're really big in Australia, and they're very well known in like the periphery scene, but they don't sound anything like that. It's weird. Like, that scene loves that band, but the band sounds more like Tool and Radiohead in a modern kind of way. They're really, really good. I'll send you that. It's phenomenal.
Do it. Are the mix polls closed? Can I enter in this contest? What can I do here?
There's still time.
Okay, well, send me the tracks.
There's still time.
I want everybody to hear what I do.
I will. I'll send you those right away. They're really, really good. I love the drums. Stellar. So, I'll send those to you right now.
Fuck yeah.
Cool.
All right. I'm mixing. I'm back to mixing now. Shit.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed this.
To get in touch with the URM podcast, visit urm.com/podcast and subscribe today.